The good news for students taking the new redesigned SAT is that the writing section is much more predictable and much easier to prepare for than on the previous test. On previous tests, quotations and prompts would change, and there's no way to know ahead of time what we were dealing with. But every single time an essay appears on the new SAT, it is a rhetorical analysis. They're going to provide you with a text, a short reading of about 600 to 700 words, and they're going to ask you to analyze how effectively the author of that text persuades an audience. And we're going to use something for this called the rhetorical triangle. The rhetorical triangle was developed by Aristotle in ancient Greece. When listening to speakers and politicians and reading writers of his day, he noted that there were three common appeals that an effective speaker or an effective writer would make. And he called these a rhetorical triangle. The idea was that there was balance in the rhetorical triangle, that a good writer or speaker will hit all three of these ideas at some point in his speech or in his essay, and that would lead to a convincing case being presented that an audience would be likely to agree with. These are logos, ethos, and pathos. In no particular order. Logos is an appeal to logic. You can see the word logic in that, meaning that if an audience is to be convinced of something, you should appeal to their rational sensibility. You should offer them some kind of convincing proof that they can understand. Whenever a writer or a speaker quotes statistical data, when they point to case studies, when they establish a chain of causality, cause and effect, if this happens, then that will happen, they are trying to appeal to this logical, rational sense in us. Logos is probably the most emphasized way of making your case or making your persuasion known to an audience, because we are kind of rational thinking beings, and we tend to think that if someone can be convinced logically, they will agree, and that is largely the case, though certainly not always. Another leg of the rhetorical triangle is ethos, from which we get the word ethics, and this is basically a certain amount of credibility. Really can take two forms or two shapes. You can establish credibility on a human level with an appeal to some kind of expert or authority figure, or you can appeal to some kind of ethical, moral, legal authority that's kind of enshrined in the culture, something that we know is an established good. For example, appealing to this idea of personal freedoms or a sense of justice, something that is kind of universally agreed upon as a good thing. If you can align your case with that, you've established ethos. And then finally, and perhaps just as important as the other two, we have pathos, from which we get words like pathetic, sympathetic, empathetic, empathy. And this is an appeal to emotion, right? And again, not a logical sense, not a rational, not an explainable by statistical data sense, but simply manipulating an audience or getting an audience to think or feel the way you want them to through a base emotion: fear, pride, anger, excitement, whatever it might be. This is the idea of mob mentality, popular opinion, people being swayed by what others might think or feel about them. And a good speaker or writer will use all three of these in an appeal. So in your essay, when you are reading this sample text and you're trying to structure your response, you have 50 minutes to write, I think you should work in a 5-paragraph structure. You'll have a very short introductory paragraph, a very short concluding paragraph, and then in the 3 body paragraphs, you're going to have your appeals. Now, I would see the best way of organizing your essay as thinking of each body paragraph as a type of appeal. The order to me is not so essential, but just the idea that you go through the essay and you find where the writer appeals to a logical sense, find any statistics, find any case studies, find any citations, you might want to say, and use those as logos. Find where the writer uses ethos. Do they appeal to some kind of moral or religious sense? Do they appeal to some sort of legal sense? Do they quote experts or offer some person as an authority figure on these things? And then, where are they tugging at your heartstrings? Where is the emotional content in the piece? And if you can think about logos, ethos, and pathos and provide one, hopefully two, concrete pieces of example for each of these, you have your essay. Uh, After you transition out of your introductory paragraph and you go into body paragraph 1, say we are taking logos first. If you can cite 2 instances of logos in the text and explain them, that's an adequate body paragraph. Then you can move on to ethos, cite 2 instances of ethos in the essay and explain them, and so on and so forth. Again, the order is not essential. I don't think it has to be logos, then ethos, then pathos. In fact, as you're reading, one will probably jump out more than the others. Maybe you'll have an essay that's heavy on stats and logic. Maybe you'll have an essay that's heavy on emotion. Maybe you have an essay that's heavy on a sense of moral justice, and in which case you tailor it accordingly. But if you can approach the essay from that perspective, no matter what text they throw at you, you should know exactly how you're going to go about planning and writing your SAT essay.